So way before the business trip, actually, I had a lot of unwanted attention, I'd say. It's all pretty disgusting, really, but it built up over time. There's a particular place I always wanted to go, but I had this nagging feeling in the back of my head, oh my God, it's going to be with him. And it was just us two, unfortunately, overseas at a conference. And it was very, very difficult because although we had to do what we did in the daytime, and that was fine, he always made sure that he arrived where I was at the end of the conference every day and made me feel sort of obliged to go for dinner. And I didn't know anybody else. There was nobody I could really talk to, and I was like scared to go on my own with him, but I just felt that I had to go, and he was sort of slightly senior to me. So we went for dinner every night, but it was very difficult because his advances just got so much more heavier and more disgusting, really, that I actually started to get quite sick, and I felt that I couldn't attend the last days of the conference. I had nobody to tell. There was just nobody for me to tell about this. I didn't know anybody. So I stayed in the hotel room for like the last day of my trip because I just got so anxious. It was just awful. And then I got an early flight home without explaining it to him. I felt like I just had to run.
I have always loved business travel. But once upon a time I wasn't disabled and now I'm in a wheelchair. So I think there are some probably obvious challenges about getting in through an airport with a wheelchair. There are special ways of getting you through the airport onto the plane. It's all very well dealt with, but it's also in nerve-wracking times. It's about planning. It's about almost planning to be exhausted, because I wake up exhausted. Chronic fatigue is one of my symptoms. Making sure I've got this enormous checklist of medications and gadgets to get me through. And then just the nervous stress behind getting to my chair with all this great support that happens in airports. And then at the other end of the plane journey, is my wheelchair going to still be intact when they're my legs? Is it going to be intact when I get off the plane?
As a trans traveller, I want to be safe. I want to travel to a jurisdiction where I know that I'm being protected. I've got a UK passport, so I have that privilege. But equally, I'm also aware that the trans and non-binary map of the world, there are places where I am illegal and I will be put to death. Airports are very binary places. So if you go through the security check and you're patted down, the chances are they're going to pick a male or female to pat you down. And depending on where you're at through your transition, or if you're non-binary, that can be really, really stressful. When I was newer into my transition journey, I could guarantee I would be picked out and patted down.
The travelling with being someone on the autism spectrum has a variety of challenges, whether that's sights, sounds, smells, visual and sensory stimulation. The biggest challenge that I've had is usually around checking in or security. I like to know that I've got everything I need with me, so passport, tickets, boarding pass, wallet, etc. And there is nothing that arouses suspicion more than a man standing in a check-in queue tapping himself around his pockets. And then, because I get very nervous about that, I will see and think, oh no, I'm looking suspicious. Right, stop looking suspicious. And then the kind of the crescendo of that will build, and so I will get more nervous and more anxious and trying to suppress being suspicious, which doesn't work and makes you look even more suspicious. And then I'll look for my tickets and boarding pass again. And inevitably, by the time I get to wherever it is, I'm the one that's pulled out of the line, or the one that is standing there kind of sweating profusely, worrying about what the person's going to say when you check in. So, it can be quite a challenging thing to do, because one of the things with being on the spectrum, it's an invisible disability. No one can see it from the outside. No one knows that that's what you're going through. That's, for me, is probably the biggest challenge.
One of my memorable experiences, but not necessarily in a positive way, was for a business class trip that was long haul, and really the experience just went downhill from the moment I checked in. So whilst I'd got to the business class lounge and then the security check-in, then there was repeated security check-ins, then I went through the scanners, and then again they asked me to open up my bags, and the passengers are watching me. And in some ways, the added bonus of having business class was then not there, because I was sort of at the back of the queue. And by the time I got onto the plane and I went into the business class lounge, then people were looking at me thinking, okay, does she belong here? Then others were coming over and kind of talking near me, but not necessarily with me. And then I got approached whilst I was on my seat, and then they asked me to go out of my seat and to talk in a different area. And all this time, other passengers were watching, and it was making them uneasy. And I was feeling really unsettled in this process, and actually quite vulnerable.